Happy Halloween, everyone, or whatever you are celebrating. Um, Sorry I've been away for so long. I've been busy, been with doing work, other stuff. It's been hectic, but I thought I'd read you another spooky story or a fantasy story, whatever it is you want to call it. This is on DeviantArt. DeviantArt is called a Nuckin, or a Huldra, and it's made by Iglybo on DeviantArt. So let's get to it. He appeared at the serene-looking waters through the leaves. It looked safe, and all the stories claimed the creature only woke at night. But still, he was reluctant to approach. But it was a long walk back to the village well, and he couldn't afford to leave his kiln that long. The fire might burn wild, ruining his charcoal yield completely. The man considered his options, wondering if he could just ignore the thirst. But it was a hot day, and feeding the fire only made the heat worse. He knew he couldn't risk fainting out in these woods. He might never wake up. Very cautiously he took a step out of the trees, gripping the handle of his bucket tightly, holding it in front of him as it would protect him. He cursed again the bird whose sudden alarming cry had startled him enough to knock over his water bucket. He took a deep breath and slowly approached the water, ready to bolt if anything moved. The sunlight sparkled off the gently flowing water, and birds sang in the trees above. It was almost too perfect. The man ignored the peaceful setting and dunked his bucket as soon as he was close enough to the water's edge. Then he turned on his heel sharply, spilling a little of the water over himself in the process, and skirted for the relative safety of the tree line. Then the birds fell silent, and the music hit him. It was like a wave engulfing him, making his thoughts seem distant. All he knew was its beauty. He turned. There in the water stood the Nuckin, waist deep in the clear water, playing the sweetest of tunes on an exquisitely ornate violin. The Nuckin's bare skin was an unpleasant mottled gray in appearance, and though his dark blue-black hair was thick, wild, tangled, and matted with blood, his features had a delicate, refined look. His eyes were focused on the instrument he played expertly. They glowed a faint green in the daylight to his otherworldly appearance. The creature was an unsettling mixture of beauty and ugliness, his wildness at odds with the sophistication of his playing and the gentleness of his expression. He seemed focused only on the music, as if unaware of his captive audience. The song he played seemed to whisper to the charcoal burner in a soft, sweet voice. It urged the man to approach the player, to get closer to that beautiful sound. He took an involuntary step forward, towards the water. Then the memory of 100 stories surfaced through the stupor. They screamed at him, reminding him of what happened to those who lured by the Nuckin. He hesitated, but the lure of the music was strong. Struggling to think, he willed himself to take a step back, but the insidious voice of the music whispered again. How can you drown water so shallow? The Nuckin is only waist deep. You could stand in it. You can't be enchanted if you can still see the danger. There's no harm in going closer to listen. The man nodded to the silent voice, and slowly approached the water's edge. The water was clear and pure, and the stones of the bed were clearly visible. It looked shallow. He stepped off the ledge as the freezing cold water closed over his head. He realized too late the refraction of the water was all that made the stones appear close. The chill drove away the magic of the song, and knowing his mistake, he swam for the surface. He started clearing the water for just long enough to take one gasping breath. He saw the Nuckin smirk at him and speed up his music. Then reeds that had not been there a moment before snaked around from the depths, tangling around his wrists and ankles, pulling him back under. Water filled his nose and mouth as he panicked, thrashing in the water against the reeds as he grew weaker and weaker. His last air spent, his lungs burning, desperate for air. He gasped for breath only to inhale more water. The darkness ate away at his vision and engulfing him. The Nuckin smiled smugly. It let the last notes of his song fade as the limp body floated to the surface. The reeds he had summoned snaked back into the riverbed as the spell of the music ceased. The current in the brook was slow, and the body floated at a gentle pace to the edge of the water, where it was caught on a large rock that protruded into the water's course. A woman prodded the body cautiously with her toe from the safety of the rock. She had long, messy ginger hair, pale skin, and a long tail, protruding from her short, tattered skirt of a ragged dress. The tail was coated in very short, fine ginger hair, with a darker ginger tuft of the hair on the end. She flicked it agitatedly. She looked around 18, but she seemed younger. There was fear and uncertainty in her bright turquoise eyes. The Nukin smiled at her. I hold her. I haven't seen one of your kind around here in many seasons. I thought you all retreated further into the woods. Where is your clan? He wondered, watching her every move carefully. The Huldra ignored the question, intent on searching through the pockets of the floating body. Now she was sure he was dead. She found a purse and sniffed it curiously, emptying the coins into her hand. She examined the markings on a few before tossing them into the water. She sniffed the leather again. Cow? Oh yes, they make things from dead animals. I have seen some of the nobles with really intricate designs on it. Humans have many flaws, but they can make death quite beautiful, remarked the Nukin, still watching the girl. She shrugged and found a sheathed knife, pulling it off the belt. She drew it and examined the blade, tasting it with her tongue. Bones of the earth, damaged by the fire. Made tame and shaped for them, she muttered. Well, fire is their ally, I suppose. It admires them. They are the only thing more destructive than the flames themselves, after all. Always hungering, always burning, devouring forests whole. But for the humans it loves, it will sit in the hearth like a well-behaved dog, cooks them food, shapes their tools, eager for them to feed it more. The Nukin shook his head in disgust. It raised them up from apes and unleashed them on all nature. Now their axes tear down our forests to feed it. The Huldra shuddered slightly. They fed my family to the flames, she replied in a quiet voice. Ah, so your clan stayed on the edge of the forest. I know they burnt some to clear it, inquired the Nukin. The Huldra nodded, staring at the knife again. The Nukin played a few sad notes on his violin, his eyes fixed on her face. The magic started to wash over the Huldra, but its effects were far weaker than it had been on the human. And before he could sway her, she snatched a pebble and threw at the Nukin, who lowered his bow. Just testing if it would work. You can't blame me for wanting to add such a pretty creature to my collection. The Huldra hissed at him, but he just smiled disarmingly in response. So you are all alone now, he inquired, curiously. The girl nodded again, her tail drooping. It won't be easy to find the others. They are hidden deep in the woods. You could search forever and always be alone, he warned. She shrugged, wishing for a change of subject. Why a violin? Where do you even keep it? She asked. The Nukin smiled and closed it to hand, holding the violin as it dissolved into water. A mere illusion, an affectation of magic designed to lure the humans. Much like your beauty. It's simply a pleasant-looking trap, he replied calmly. So your kind are protectors of nature, of the wilderness, just like the Huldra. A kind of Ra? She asked. The Nukin shrugged. So it would seem. So what's your name? I'm Ginilov, she told him. The Nukin laughed scornfully. Name? Names are for humans. Nature needs no name. Your kind are far too much like them. No wonder my magic still affects you, he smirked. The Huldra frowned, a little hurt by his scorn. Well, you need a name. Don't you get confused when you talk to other Nukin if you don't use names? Anyway, my parents gave me my name and I like it, she answered defensively. The Nukin scoffed. Nukin don't meet other Nukin. We can't leave the waters that gave birth to us. Parents are such a human concept. I have always wondered if perhaps your kind did mix with the humans. There are stories they tell. The Huldra disguises herself as a human, as a proper Christian wedding, with the human she loves. Then off drops her tail, and her wish to be human is granted. She even gets a soul, he recited in a sing-song tone. Is that what you'd wish for? Ginilov spat at the floor. Those stories are lies. Humans and their wishful thinking. We should never mix with their kind, she exclaimed in disgust. We are spirits of nature, and we defend the wilderness they seek to destroy. They want to take the wilderness so that we give it to them. We lure them into the wild and let them try and survive. They rarely last one lunar cycle. We nearly wiped out the village before they burnt our forest. I was the only one that escaped. But there are only a few humans left there now. Well, well. Perhaps we aren't so different, responded Nukin, sounding impressed. The Holdra smiled proudly. So if you've never met another Nukin, do you ever get lonely? She asked. The Nukin gave her a thoughtful look, approaching the edge of the water. I'm not sure I would know the feeling, though I suppose if there's no chance for you to find the other Holdra, you could always stay here with me. We could be our own clan. It might well be the first time a Nukin has ever had a friend, he replied. The Holdra slid down from the rock and crouched by the body, looking thoughtful. I suppose it would be nice to have at least one friend around here, she mused. The Nukin smiled. Then within a sudden lunge, gripped her ankle, pulling her into the water. She thrashed and struggled against him as he held her under, the smirk on his face clearly visible through the clear waters. He spoke, his voice clear in spite of him being under the water with her. You really thought a Nukin would want a friend? So very human. So easily fooled. I don't kill to protect the wilderness. Nukin or not raw. I kill for the sheer joy. He laughed mockingly as she struggled, already starting to grow weaker. Her hand still held the knife she had taken from the body. Remembering it, she gripped tightly and slashed, as hard as she could, at the Nukin's chest. The creature's dark blue blood filled the water, obscuring his face. The Nukin fought to keep a hold of her. When he tried to catch one arm, she pulled the other away. She slashed at Ash's throat, cutting deep, then kicked him away from her using the momentum, swimming for the surface. Knowing she only had moments before he was after her, she scrabbled at the rocks of the bank, trying to pull herself out. The Nukin surfaced and clutched at her ankle, but his grip was weaker now, and a welling kick to the nose dislodged him. She crawled out of reach and collapsed, breathing heavily, overwhelmed with relief at the fear of air filling her lungs once again. The Nukin rose to the surface of the water, once again appearing to be only waist deep, the water running over his body, washing away the last of the blue blood, as his wounds closed up. Tut tut. Using a human weapon as are we? How very domesticated of you, he sneered at her, unfazed by his failure. Ignoring him, Genilov pushed herself weakly to her feet. Tying the knife onto the rag belt she wore, she headed away from the brook, deeper into the woodland, where her brethren might be hiding. Thinking it would be better to search for them forever, spend another moment near the Nukin. And that is it. I hope I read clearly because I've been out of practice, and I hope I pronounced those words correctly because my accent is weird. Now, I don't know when I'll be able to post next, but whenever I do, keep in mind, and I'll see you in the next video.